Here I've got the command chits laid out that are going to go into the cup for turn 3. Again, we have our standard supply reinforcement, artillery, and air-powered chits that go in the cup. And as the Germans were limited to 2 command chits this particular turn to choose from, I want to keep my motorized divisions in play as much as possible given their high offensive capabilities as well as their high movement point allowance for these motorized divisions. The Russians, I've chosen 16th, 13th, and 21st Army, so let's show you where they're at on the map real quick. Here we've got 16th Army in Smolensk, and by having this HQ activate in a turn, it will activate 20th Army, which is sitting up here, which will get these units in play. We have an isolated German stack here that would be nice to hit again in combat, so this keeps this center area sort of open for maneuver. 13th Army is down here, a little bit further south, and we've got some out of supply German units. We've got some Russian units in here that we can do something with because they're within 4 hexes of 13th Army. And finally, 21st Army. So if we look down here on the southern flank, this is a pretty weak area for the Germans. All this wide open space, we can activate these units down here and move them potentially northward to threaten the German southern flank. As I've sort of looked over the map at the conclusion of turn 2, I've realized some mistakes, strategic mistakes that I've made, not rule-breaking mistakes. As we can see here, we don't have 2 headquarters units within 4 hexes of each other, so unfortunately these 2 groups would have to be activated separately. That's one mistake. And as the Germans, I'm looking up here in the north, and I've got 3 HQs up here, all wrapped up in this isolated part of the map. And certainly, I don't need 3 German headquarters units all sort of right next to each other up here. That makes for some really poor positioning of these HQs. And the reason for that is if we skim a little bit further south here, we'll see that I've got some German infantry divisions that have no HQ associated with them. And therefore, they're not going to be able to move at all this turn. It would have been better for me, rather than stack all these HQs up here in the north, to spread them out and have a line of HQs that would get both these infantry divisions in play, as well as our northern group here. And unfortunately, I haven't done that. So this particular turn, again, the Germans get 2 command chits put into the cup. Also, they're not necessarily limited to only 2 command chits this play, and the reason for that is our Minsk pocket. So when the reinforcement chit is drawn this particular turn, we're going to be able to release more German units from the Minsk pocket. And according to the rules, if we happen to release at least 1 headquarters unit, we can spend a reinforcement point from the number that are allocated to us for that particular release. And by spending that additional point, we can throw a 9th Army command chit directly into the cup for that turn. And so really, if we decided to use that option, which we will, we'll have 3 command chits in the cup for this turn. But it's just a matter of when does the reinforcement command chit get drawn, and that's sort of the overall question. So I'm going to go ahead and mix these all up into the cup, and then we're going to see what we'll do after that. Okay, let's go ahead and draw our first command chit for turn number 3. Mixing up the cup here, we're going to draw randomly, and we pull 16th Army. So the Russians are going to be able to go, and again, to remind everyone, 16th Army is sitting right here in Smolensk. So let's go ahead and figure out what we're going to do. Looking at 16th Army here, certainly whatever is in this particular hex down here in Smolensk gets activated. A PVO unit can't move, and we've got a 32nd Russian Infantry Corps down here with a 3-4. Now, I'm probably going to leave these guys in Smolensk for the very reason that if we scan a little bit south here, they're threatened a little bit by a 2nd Panzer Group. They are certainly within easy striking distance of Smolensk, but the nice thing is they are behind a minor river, which will affect combat values, of course. So what we're going to do is, it looks like we're in a good position here to just smack this 14th Motorized Division as well as the 12th Panzer Group here in this hex. Our German units are isolated, therefore their defense values are halved, so it comes to be a total of 5 divided by 2 is going to be 2 rounded down. And if I attack with all of these units surrounding this stack, we've got 4, let's see, 9, 13, 14, 16 to 2, that's 8 to 1. So this is a good opportunity for the Russians to inflict some heavy damage on these German mechanized units. The other thing that we need to think about is what we want to do with this stack of units here. And what I'm thinking is this: we're going to end up winning this battle, and we're going to try to advance after combat by pushing forward. What I want to do is start putting pressure on these 2 German stacks right here, sort of west of them and east of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these units up here 1 hex, 1, actually I can move them like so. Sure, why not? We're going to move those guys up. And then what I'm going to do here with 20th Army is I'm going to pull them back, or I'm going to move them down and over a hex. The reason for this is to try to set up a 4 hex range for units that might end up in some of these hexes over here to the west. So we've got our 8 to 1 combat that we're going to perform here. And the Soviet player rolls a 10-sided die, which we do, and we roll a 3. On our 8 to 1 column, that's a 1 DR2. This is going to be a pretty massive blow for the Germans, so we have to lose a step, which apparently 14th Motorized Division, if they lose a step, they're eliminated. Here's the problem. I'm going to take a hit on 12th Panzer, but they have to retreat, and they're retreating through enemy zone of control. Therefore, we have to take another step loss, and the question is, which one do we want to take? 14th Motorized Division is going to be eliminated. The reason why I decided to choose 14th Motorized Division is the fact that 12th Panzer still has a higher offensive combat rating here to keep around. So the Russians managed to destroy a German mechanized unit, which might factor into the victory point allocation at the end of the game. This is rough. That was a pretty major blow for the German player. So now we get to advance after combat, and mechanized units again move 2. And again, to remind ourselves, a red and a tan unit can stack in the same hex. However, 2 tan units cannot. And so I'm going to position my units like so. All right, so that concludes that particular activation. So now we go to our cup, mix these guys around, and we pull out 13th Army. So the Russians are off to a great start for turn 3. Now 13th Army is down here in the south. We can kind of show that here. And looking at this, it's pretty easy to tell that these 2 stacks are going to be activated out here on the front line. And we've got a unit down here in a VP hex that is activated as well. Now, out of supply markers does not affect defense values. So there's really not going to be a good opportunity to, that is incorrect. We cannot stack these 2 units in the same hex. Let me go see where these units were last turn, and then I'll fix this problem right here. So some of you might have caught this in the last video. I made a major mistake where I stacked 2 tan units in the same hex and performed combat on 18th Panzer Group. I'm not going to go back and fix any of this. What we'll do, all we did was we incurred a retreat on this guy, so it doesn't really break the game too much. But what I'll do is, to fix this, I would have to have advanced after combat, and therefore now they're not going to be stacked together. It's unfortunate, but on a first playthrough, we're going to make mistakes. So looking at this, there's really not much we can do in here. Again, the Germans are too strong to attack. I don't really have anything to bring up at all. In fact, I have nothing to bring to bear to boost some sort of offensive. So, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it looks like 53rd Infantry Corps is going to be left out to dry. I could try to pull back, a little bit here and reconsolidate my lines. So by doing this, I've sort of spread myself out, maintaining some zone of control around a wide area, and I'll probably move this guy up like that. Okay, so that, oh, this guy's still isolated. So I forgot to place my isolation marker back on here. Again, when a unit is isolated, they remain isolated until the next supply chit is drawn. So, and I believe that is correct. Okay, so that really ends this activation for 13th Army. There's not much more that the Russians can do. So we're going to set that chit off to the side. We go to our cup, and we draw reinforcement phase. So it's sort of unfortunate that the Russians weren't able to get the reinforcement chit drawn before they used 2 of their command chits, because that would have allowed them to introduce new units to do things with. But now it's drawn, so we're going to figure out what we're going to do with this. For the Russians, turn 3 tells us they're allowed to spend 3 points worth on reinforcements, plus they get 1 elite division this turn, plus a PVO unit. And there's our PVO unit. So the PVO units get to be placed into a VP hex, which we'll figure out here in a second. Our elite Russian unit gets pulled out of a cup, and we happen to pull this elite infantry division. And then finally, we get to spend 3 points on reinforcements, which come from the Soviet reserve box. It costs 2 points to bring on a headquarters unit, which I really don't think we need right now. And then it costs 1 point for any other combat capable unit. So it only makes sense to spend this on, at the very least, let's get our mechanized units back on the board. And we happen to have 3 of them, so that's what we're going to do. Now the question is, where do we want to place these reinforcements? The mechanized units will allow us some mobility, so I don't want to place them in some sort of position where they can't take advantage of their movement point allowance. And, well, let's see here. Let's think about this. 21st Army, we know this command chit is in the cup, and it hasn't been drawn yet. We could potentially try to place some mechanized units down here in the south and use them to really put pressure on this weak southern flank by the Germans, and I think that's what we're going to do. So again, the rule for placing reinforcements is you can place it on an HQ or any adjacent space. Now I have to be careful about how this is placed, because if I want to break out into the open, I'm going to have to go through the zone of control right here, which is going to cost me a lot of movement points. Also, moving through the woods is going to cost me movement points. It's too bad we're a bit congested down here, but I think we'll place one on the HQ. That gives us 3 mechanized units down here in the south. Let's see if we want to try to place something, or our last unit, elsewhere. We're going to place 7th Mechanized Corps right here next to 13th Army. Again, this sort of keeps him out in the open, sort of in this clear area that will allow him to maneuver a little bit. And potentially that will help threaten any sort of German drive up here to Smolensk, because now we've got a couple of units that can threaten the southern flank up here for 2nd Panzer Group. So now the Germans get reinforcements if we decide to release units from the Minsk pocket, which we certainly will. And, well, before I do that, I forgot about these two. A PVO unit goes into a VP hex, and they can't stack with any other, the VP hexes that are currently in danger have a PVO unit in them already, here and up here in the north, and certainly down, let's see, where's the other one? I think that's it. Oh no, right here. We have a PVO unit here as well. So it's really sort of a, doesn't really matter where we place him. I think what we'll do is we'll put him onto this VPX right here, because this is the main road to Moscow, right up the middle of the map. So let's start filling those guys in. And then finally we have this elite division that we can place. And elite divisions can stack with tan units. So we can place them here. Now the German player gets reinforcements out of the Minsk pocket if we decide to do that. And I'll remind everybody, here's our Minsk escape table, and depending on the number of unit values we decide to release from Minsk, depends upon what column we roll on to see if Russian units escape. And so the point values are down here, one for an infantry division, two for an HQ, and one for a 9th Army command chit. So I really only want to spend 7 points at this point in time, because that will minimize the benefits that the Russians could potentially get when we roll the die. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the HQ, and we want to get a command chit thrown in the cup for this turn, so that will be 6, leaving us with 1 more point. We'll do another infantry division. So 9th Army chit will be thrown into the cup, which is good for the German player. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to roll our 6-sided die for the Minsk escape table on the 1 to 7 column, and we roll a 4. And lucky for us, a 4 is a no result, so that no Russian units get to escape the pocket. The German player gets to immediately introduce their units on the map and move them forward. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to rush them straight forward down here into the center of the map, where 2nd Panzer Group is in desperate need of some help, either in the center or down here in the south. Since we are deploying 9th Army units, they have to come in on this point, and we're going to use strategic movement to move them forward. When they move along a road, it costs 1/3 of a movement point. So we can go 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, 5, and 5. Okay, so we know we can get them about this far forward here, so let's go ahead and do that. 1, 2. 3, 4, 5. Now, the reason why I decided to keep a couple of these units to the left of this river is so that I can move them down south to get into Mogilev, a VP hex. 2nd Panzer can't be wrapped up down here the entire game, so I have to get infantry units down here to relieve these 2 units to do other things. So that's what we're going to do. So now the reinforcement phase is over. We go back to our cup. We randomly draw air power. So this allows us to take our 1 used Stuka unit as the German player and flip it to its unused side, which is good. So now we've got a full complement of Stuka units that are unused for this turn. And now we've completed air power, and we go back to our cup and we draw another chit, and it is 3rd Panzer Group. So 3rd Panzer Group is up here sort of in the north. They're the ones that took a massive hit by the Russian counterattack. Kudos to them. And so we're going to sit here for a little bit and figure out what it is we want to do for this particular activation. Okay. The main goal for this activation is going to be to try and save our isolated 12th Panzer Group sitting right here. I certainly don't want to lose another mechanized unit if I can help it. And at the same time, we've got a nice doom stack here with T-34s and this 5th Mechanized Corps here sitting in a swamp that we're going to want to try and eliminate as well. So I think I've counted this out properly. 7th Panzer Group is going to be able to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 into the swamp, 2 for enemy zone of control. That's going to be 10. So he can just make it here. And now I've surrounded this Russian snack in the swamp hex. Another thing I want to do is I want to reinforce our damaged Panzer Group or Panzer Division down here. So I'm going to move 19th Panzer down. And I'm going to move 14th Motorized Division 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Because I'm going to try to hit this stack as hard as possible, and we're going to use a Stuka unit to do it. I think I've got enough here to get some favorable die rolls on the 51st Infantry Corps from this stack here, and then 20th Motorized Division and Company can attack, perhaps, this stack right here. And that way we can try to open up this this sort of approach around this group of units down here in the south, or sort of in the center of the map. I want to try to open up a gap here so we can encircle these units and destroy them. So let's go ahead and do our first combat. I think it's the most important one, is going to be on this stack. We've got an isolated unit, which will have their attack factor halved. So that's going to be 9 plus 4 is 13, plus 3 is 16, plus 9 is 25, to 7. That's a 2 to 1. The defender gets a bonus 1 shift to the left on our CRT. That goes down to 1.5 to 1. If we bring in a Stuka unit, that will go up to a 3 to 1 on our CRT. So we go ahead and we roll our 6-sided die, and on a 3 to 1, we roll a 3. That's a defender retreat. There's really only one place this defender can retreat to as a stack, or I could split them up like this, where I move my T-34 here, and I can move 5th Mechanized Corps down here, so I don't break any stacking rules. Now, because they're retreating through enemy zone of control, one of these guys has to take a step loss, just 1 unit for the entire stack, not both units. So we'll put 5th Mechanized there, and then we'll put our T-34 unit right in here. And then we can advance after combat. Motorized divisions can move 2, so I'm going to stack 14th Motorized Division with our Panzer Division, so it's not defending at simply a 2. Alright, now let's see. I got to flip our Stuka unit to its U side. So now I've got 2 left available to me. Let's go ahead and attack the 51st, so I can bring in 10 to 3. That's a 3 to 1. As long as he retreats, he's going to have to take a step loss, because he won't be able to retreat here unless he gets a DR2. Let me think about this for a minute. I believe he can go ahead and retreat through this hex without incurring any step loss, as long as he doesn't end up in this hex, because if he does, then he's going to be eliminated. So on a DR2 result, he's going to be able to get away by retreating to one of these 2 hexes, or even here. On a DR result, there's only one place he can retreat to, and that is right here. So actually what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to perform combat in this hex first. And the reason for that is because if these guys happen to retreat, I can advance after combat 2 hexes by going 1, 2, and then I've got this guy wrapped up in an enemy zone of control. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got 15 to 5, that's 3 to 1. I really need to incur a victory on this, so I'm going to introduce my second Stuka unit. So we're going to be rolling on a 5-to-1. So we're guaranteed to cause these guys to retreat, giving us our advance after combat ability, and we roll a 2. So a 2 on a 5-to-1 is a DR. I'll flip my Stuka to its used side. So these guys will retreat 1 hex, and they will retreat there, and I will advance 2 hexes, 1 and 2. Now I'm going to hit the 51st Infantry Corps. We're rolling, let's see, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to 3. That's a 3-to-1. We need a 3 or better to do some sort of damage here, and we roll a 5. 5 on a 3-to-1 is a DR2, meaning he's got to retreat through enemy zone of control 1, 2, and he's going to take a step loss doing it. So not too shabby. And then we can advance after combat. We will advance them here by going 1 and 2. I don't want to wrap these guys up in the Russian zone of control in case I want to maneuver them around perhaps over here on the next turn, or maneuver them the other way. That will save me 2 movement points by keeping them out of that zone of control. So that ends 3rd Panzer Group activation. And for our next draw, it's going to be 9th Army. So we've got a couple of decisions here how we want to do this. We've got German HQs up here in the north, and we also have our group down here in the middle now that has an HQ unit that can activate. And then, of course, we've got our Mexican standoff down here in the south. I would really like to move or get these units moving right now, but I think what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to activate these guys up here in the north, and I'm going to try to swing a couple of HQs down here to fill in the gaps. So the next time we draw a 9th Army chit, both groups down here in the middle and up here in the north are going to be activated at the same time, and then we can move all of our units. So we're going to see, we're going to figure out what we're going to do here for this particular activation. I'm looking at this, and certainly I don't have the movement allowance to try to encircle anybody for favorable combat. The most I could do are some frontal assaults and perhaps incur some retreat on these units. There's just not enough movement points here for this particular German unit to swing around and try to wrap up these guys in enemy zone of control. He's not going to be able to quite make it. So this is going to be more of a maneuvering turn here. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and get him in position to cut off enemy zone of control here, or to cut off, or to move in here and invoke enemy zone of control around these units. I want to spread these HQs out as much as possible, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with this guy. And now we've got an HQ unit that can move 10. And so we're going to use this guy as our HQ to fill in the gap here to get all of these HQs within range of each other. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like that. And then we're going to swing down our northernmost HQ up here to within range. 2, 3. And so by doing this, we can now activate with 1 9th Army command chit all 5 of these infantry divisions up here in the north, and then our newly arrived German infantry units down here in the center. And unfortunately, I didn't think about this before. We could have had a really good activation this turn, but that was an oversight on my part. So that ends the 9th Army activation, and we go back to our cup, and we're going to pull out the supply phase. So here we go, supply. We remind ourselves that the Soviets get 2 out of supply markers that they can place on German units this turn, and we're looking for anybody that is isolated which I don't think there is anybody that's isolated. Ah, wait a minute. Yes, there is. 53rd. 53rd Russian Infantry Corps is isolated because he cannot draw a supply line from his hex to a friendly supply source because these hexes surrounding the 53rd are in enemy zone of control. So we can go ahead and place an isolation marker on this unit, which again, an isolation marker will have attack, defense, and movement allowance until the next time the supply chit is drawn. So we're looking at this, and let me pull these out of supply markers out of here. So I do believe the Russians get to place their out of supply markers first. Actually, I don't think the order matters right now. Let's look real quick. Is anybody else isolated? Nobody's isolated up here. Nobody is isolated up here. So we can see that these two units, actually, this guy's isolated. The 62nd Infantry Corps is isolated, and I don't believe you can negate enemy zone of control by having a friendly unit in a hex for this particular set of rules. Okay, no, it can't. All right. So because this hex has a friendly unit in it, it negates the enemy zone of control in that hex. So the 62nd Infantry Corps can draw a supply through this particular hex and over here to the edge of the map. So this guy is not isolated at all. And now the Russian player gets to decide where they're going to place these out of supply markers. We want to be able to maximize, we want to be able to maximize the number of units we place or that we put out of supply. So we are seriously considering stacks of German units to place these on and not single units. And I'm just looking here, and maybe we'll place this stack out of supply. And the reason why I decided to choose this stack over this one here is because these guys aren't going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. These guys have the ability to either break contact and maneuver. They're also in striking distance of taking out this 5th Mechanized Corps. And so we have their attack strength by placing that marker there. And then finally, the second out of supply marker we are going to place on this stack right here. The reason for that, I have no idea. Okay, but in this way, if we look at this, when 2nd Panzer Group goes, one of their stacks is out of supply. That's going to hurt them. If 3rd Panzer Group goes again, one of their stacks is out of supply as well. So we're sort of spreading the love around in this case. So that ends our supply phase. And we draw artillery. Now, something I haven't been thinking about at all is that we have the Guderian command chit in play, and it can trump a chit pole, and I haven't been thinking about it. I don't know if we should have played that or not, but we'll keep moving forward. So the artillery chit is poled. We roll a 6-sided die, and we roll a 1 divided by 2. We're going to round this down. So 1 divided by 2 is a half, rounded down is 0. So unfortunately, the Soviets don't get any artillery attacks this turn. All right, moving right along, we pull our next chit, and it is 21st Army. So now, we've got 21st Army that could go, or we could trump it with Guderian. Those are the only 2 command chits left for this particular turn. The question is, where is 21st Army? And I'm looking. They are down here. They are down here in the south, and so this is the Russian player's opportunity to perhaps come out and surround the 2nd Panzer Group stack down here. We're certainly going to trump this with our Guderian chit right now. We're not going to allow the Russians to surround another stack of units. So we're going to throw this back into the cup, or we can just set it off to the side because that's the last one. And so now the question is, what do we want to do with the Guderian activation? Pulling these guys out is certainly something we're going to have to do because they are in grave danger of being cut off. But I can't simply rush them over here to perform combat because that leaves the highway over to Mogilev open. So we still need to keep these guys down here as blockers, but we're going to move them back. So it's going to cost us 2, 3, 4. Now the thing about this is because I pulled this group back, so I activated the stack, right? Their buddy up here, 3rd Panzer Group, is more than 3 hexes away, so I can't move 3rd Panzer anymore. So he's going to remain in this hex right here. He won't be able to move. Our guys in blue are all next to each other, but we've got a stack here that's out of supply. That's going to have their attack and movement allowance. And we've got this isolated... Oh, no, that's the Russian player. Okay. So clearly we're going to want to try to hit this Russian unit out here in the open that's isolated. That should be an easy target. The question is, how do we want to set this up? Okay. Here's what I think we're going to do. We are going to try to get our red units down here to attack these mechanized cores, and we're going to use our blue units to try to knock out this isolated unit. So we're going to move this mechanized division 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that puts us in a position now to completely destroy this Russian infantry corps because he's wrapped up in zone of control and he's isolated. And then let's see if we can break contact with this unit and get these other units to put pressure down here. So we can certainly do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to move them over here. Okay, so now we're going to perform combat. Now, something I failed to mention is a Russian unit that's isolated. If they are eliminated due to combat, they are permanently eliminated from the game. They do not go back to the Soviet reserve box, and they cannot ever be brought on as reinforcements later on in the game. So it's imperative that we knock this guy out. And so, unfortunately, we're halved in our stack here, so we've got 8. And 9 is 17 divided by 2 rounded down is 8 plus 4 is going to be 12 to 3. That's a 4 to 1 result. And it's not going to be quite enough to eliminate him, but we can force him to retreat through enemy zone of control, possibly. And we roll a 5 on our 4 to 1 column. That's a DR2. So he's going to retreat 2 hexes. So he does get away. Now, he has to retreat. Actually, it looks like he's going to be eliminated. Looking at the retreat rules, he has to enter a hex that is closer to a friendly supply source, and the stacking limit can't be exceeded in the last hex of retreat. So, what puts him closer to a supply source? Well, certainly he's going to have to retreat south and or east to become closer to a supply source. By retreating here, he loses a step due to passing through my enemy zone of control or here. But if we look, no matter what second hex they decide to retreat through, it's another enemy zone of control. He can't go 1, 2 because now he's overstacking. So this guy, as far as I can tell, is eliminated, and he will not be back in the game. This isolation marker goes away, and then we can advance after combat, which I think we will. Like so. Now we're going to perform our last combat here, 17th Panzer and 29th Motorized Division against this mechanized unit here, and we've got 16 to 3, which is 5 to 1, and we're just going to go ahead and roll. I don't want to use my last air unit for this, and we roll it was a 4. It flipped. A 4 on a 5 to 1 is 1, 2, 3, 4 is a DR2. So he gets to retreat and get away. 1, 2. Not sure exactly where. Let's just put him there, whatever. And then we retreat, or we advance after combat. We're going to move these guys 2. And we're going to cause the 13th Army Headquarters to relocate. By moving forward 2 spaces like this, we've now wrapped this guy up in my zone of control. So the next time the supply chit is drawn, he will be isolated. 13th Army has to move a minimum of 4 hexes away from where they started from, and they have to be closer to a supply source when they're done. So we can either go this way down here, or we could go somewhere east. And I think that's 3, 4. We could bring him down here. It's going to put him out of command range of one of our units, but he is sort of wrapped up in zone of control. He's not going anywhere. So I think we're going to place him here behind the river. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So I do believe that ends that particular phase. And now we go to our last activation, which is 21st Army, who is sitting down here all nice and pretty, rearing to go. And look at this, by putting 13th Army HQ right here on this activation, let's see, here's where our 21st Army HQ is. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 13th Army gets activated again. And both of these units up here are now activated as well, including our stack in Khrushchev. Okay. So let's think about what we're going to do here for a minute. Okay, something I realized, I made another oversight here in what I was doing. Most Russian HQs have a command range of 4. The Timoshenko HQ has a command range of 6. It would have been better for me to throw the Timoshenko, well, now that we've made it through this turn and the last activation happens to be the 21st Army, which is sitting here, it would have been better for me to put Timoshenko's command chit in the cup because it would have activated this HQ because it's 6 hexes away. That's the command range of Timoshenko 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But unfortunately I didn't do that. So, oh well. We'll remember that for the next time, hopefully. So I'm looking at this, and again, I want to put as much pressure as I can down here in the south on the Germans. And there's a lot of different things we can do here. Due to the way these units are positioned in the woods and behind minor rivers, there's not enough movement points to bring them forward and try to smack the 3rd Panzer Division that's sitting up here, unfortunately. Really, the best thing we can do is just move these guys forward. This division here is going to cross the major river and expend all of their movement points. We're going to start putting pressure on the Germans over here in the west and cause them to have to backtrack perhaps to take care of this threat. We're going to move 1, 2. And we're essentially just going to move all these guys forward. 2. Now, something to keep in mind is that after turn 4, the friendly supply point on here on the map goes away. So we need to keep that in mind. We don't want to stay down here and get ourselves cut off from the rest of the map. So I think by moving forward is going to be the better option. 2, 3. I think actually we're going to move this guy 1, 2, 3. Like so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It costs 1 movement point to cross a minor river, and then we have to tack on the movement cost for the hex. So it's going to cost us 2, 3, 4. And then we'll keep our 26th Mechanized Corps sort of in behind this line as a mobile reserve. And now what I want to do is figure out how to get these HQs spread out in such a way that we get good activations or maximize our activations for the next turn. So I can move 21st Army here. I want to keep this guy within range. And I'll move this HQ here. 1, 2, 3. So on the next turn, if we put Timoshenko's HQ in the cup, we will be able to activate this HQ, 21st Army, and 13th Army, and that will essentially allow us to activate a whole bunch of units at the same time. So we're putting the pressure on here onto the German player down here in the south, and hopefully that will allow us to do good things in the future. So I think that concludes turn 3. We played that one pretty fast. I'm trying to shoot from the hip here a little bit more to keep the game going faster. And certainly this is not optimal gameplay, not even close. But if I took the time to sit down and try to figure out optimal gameplay, I would hate to post it. My father watches these things, and if him and I were to ever sit down and play this one of these days, which is the goal of these videos, to get him up to speed, so that when I do go see him, if we have a chance, we can quickly get a game going without too much sitting around trying to figure out how the game works. I certainly wouldn't want him to see an optimal gameplay. That would not be good for me. So, and I assume I would be playing the Russian side, as he likes to play the Germans in most of these games, pretty much every game that we play. So we're going to leave it at that, and in our next video we will cover turn 4.